Chapter 7. Michael felt the swaying of the Santa Maria as he looked up from the parchment. He stood up and saw that he was no longer in the crow's nest, but his feet seemed to be planted firmly in midair, moving at an ever-increasing pace away from the ship. In the next instant, Michael was standing in a small room. The air was musty, and the only light in the room came from a bare bulb hanging from a wire from the ceiling. Michael counted 7 people in the room with him. Incredibly, they were motionless. A man and a woman were seated at a tiny table. 2 teenagers, a boy and a girl, were on the floor. An interrupted card game between them, and the rest, 2 men and a woman, appeared to have stopped in mid-strike. Each person wore a look of terror. Michael heard the knocking on the wall behind him and the muffled voices of men. As he looked toward the sound, he noticed a small girl he had missed before. She was thin and sharply featured, with dark wavy hair and eyes so black that they shined. She appeared to be 12 or 13, and wore a faded blue cotton dress that seemed at home in the dingy room. She was standing so close to Michael that he had literally looked over her. This girl, too, was not moving, but as he caught her gaze, she slowly raised a finger to her lips. After what seemed an eternity, the noise ceased. There was no more knocking, no voices, just the tense silence of the room, and still no one moved. Finally, the man at the table took a deep breath and blew it out with a whoosh. "It's all right now, everyone," he said quietly, and with that the people in the room shook their heads and softly began talking to each other. "This was close," said the teenage boy on the floor. "If there had been dogs—" A tall woman, her hair rolled tightly into a bun, began weeping softly. "Now then, Petronella," her husband said as he put his arms around her. "We're safe. Shh. Hush now." He turned to the boy and said sternly, "Peter, that'll be enough about what might have been. You've upset your mother and most everyone else, I expect. We'll have no more about dogs." "I was just saying," Peter began. "Yes," the man interrupted, "and I was just saying that will be enough." Michael watched as the man led his wife into a narrow room to his left. Before the door closed, he saw a mattress on the floor and a stack of magazines. The young girl gently guided Michael to a corner and whispered, "Stay here for now, but when I leave the room, follow me." She moved toward the couple sitting at the table. The man looked tired, and his clothes were worn, but he was clean-shaven except for a small mustache. Michael thought him a rather distinguished sort. The woman sitting across from him was ghostly pale, as if she'd recently been ill. Nevertheless, she smiled as the girl approached. "Papa," the girl said, "may I go upstairs?" The man smiled. "Time to be alone again, isn't it, Anne?" "Yes, Papa." "Then certainly you may go," he said. She glanced at Michael and moved to the stairway at the back of the room. Without a sound, she went up the staircase and out of sight. Michael followed quickly, dodging the other people in the room as he passed. As he came up the stairs, he saw the girl motioning for him to hurry. The staircase seemed to go directly to the ceiling, but as Michael soon saw, there was a hatch cover that provided entrance to the attic. As soon as they were inside, the girl replaced the cover and said, "I am so excited to meet you that I almost cannot breathe." She clapped her hands together quickly, but softly. "This is thrilling, is it not?" "Yes," Michael grinned at her enthusiasm. Looking around, he saw that there was not a stick of furniture or a box or anything stored in the attic, just dust and dirt. "I expected you, did you know?" she said. "A dream is how I even know your name. It is Michael Holder. I wrote you a note just this morning. Should I get it now?" "No, no," Michael chuckled. "Hang on a minute. I don't even know where I am." "Why, you're in Amsterdam," the girl said. She took Michael's hand and pulled him toward a window. "Come," she said with a small smile. "I will show you the city." She got down on her hands and knees. "It's all right to peek from the corner. You too, come on now." Michael got down on his hands and knees and crawled to the edge of the window where she was waiting underneath the sill. As he settled himself into a more comfortable position, he said, "I heard your father call you Nan." "Yes," she replied, "and my sister's name is Margot. She is very quiet. She was the one playing cards with the boy downstairs. His name is Peter. Peter Van Daan." "What is your last name?" Michael asked. "Frank," she answered. "My papa's name is Otto, and Edith is my mother. Peter's parents are Mr. Herman and Miss Petronella. She was the one who cried, but of course she always cries." Michael didn't know how long Anne talked. He wasn't really listening anyway. "Anne Frank," he thought. "Anne Frank. This is the girl whose diary I read in English class last year. I'm in the annex." The annex, he knew, was several secret rooms connected to the back of a warehouse. Don't you think? Anne said, as she looked directly at Michael, obviously expecting a response. Michael was caught off guard by the pause in her non-stop chatter. I'm sorry, what? I said, Anne answered slowly, that Peter is very handsome, don't you think? Peter? Michael thought for a moment. Oh, the boy downstairs. Yes, he is. Trying to change the subject, Michael asked, How long have you been here? 1 year and 4 months, she said quickly. Do you know today's date? Certainly. Today is Thursday, October 28th, 1943. We went into hiding last year on the first Sunday in July. The 5th it was. Anne glanced up at the window. None of us have been outside in a very long time. How do you get food in here? Mayep is Papa's secretary. She still comes to work in the warehouse every day. After hours, she and her husband, Hink, move the bookcase in the accounting room and come through the door behind it. And Michael began, when I arrived. Oh, yes, Anne broke in. You appeared directly in front of me. Have you done that before? Does it hurt? Michael smiled in spite of the interruption. He could understand her excitement. A new person to talk to must be thrilling after 16 months. Yes, I have done it before, and no, it doesn't hurt. Michael tried again to ask her this question. And who was knocking on the walls? Nazi soldiers, Anne said. Papa calls them Gestapo. He says they dress in black. They have come now 2 times. We are quiet, and they go away. She turned and got on her knees, rising carefully to put one eye in the corner of the window. If you do this, you can see most of Amsterdam. Michael looked out the opposite corner. To his left, he saw a huge chestnut tree, and across the street, a clock tower stood in the centerpiece of the city. That's the Westerkerk, Anne said. I can lie here and watch the hands move. Anne lay down flat on the floor. He watched the little girl staring up at the gigantic clock. What are you thinking? He asked. About the clock, Anne said. Sometimes I wish for it to speed up, and at other times I beg it to slow down. But it never hears me. It is always the same. Michael was startled by the sound of whistles and loud, angry voices shattering the silence of the street below them. What is that? Michael asked. It's a razzia, Anne answered with no emotion. They are rounding up Jews. It makes me wonder about my friends. I don't know what happened to any of them. For several moments she was quiet, thoughtful. Michael said nothing. Then she looked directly at him and said, Everyone is being taken away to camps. Did you know? The Germans say that the Jews are working and living comfortably there, but it's not true. Michael was careful with his words. How do you know that? Anne shrugged. We all know. Letters are censored, of course, but occasionally the truth is made known. Mayep received a postcard from a friend who had been taken away. It said the food was good and conditions were superb, but at the end of the message he wrote, Give my regards to Ellen de Groot. The words were Dutch, of course. The German censors did not know that Ellende means misery, and Groot is terrible. Without warning, the Westerkerk began to chime. Anne placed her hands over her ears and smiled at Michael, who had nearly jumped out of his skin when the chiming began less than 70 feet away. It is only a bit too loud, Anne said, giggling at her understatement. Michael smiled. How do you sleep with that thing ringing day and night? Actually, Anne said, we don't even notice it much anymore. Miss Petronella is the only one of us who even comments. Papa says the clock is a good thing for her because it provides something to complain about every hour on the hour. Michael laughed. What about you? He asked. What do you complain about? I do not complain, Anne said. Papa says complaining is an activity just as jumping rope or listening to the radio is an activity. One may choose to turn on the radio. One may choose to complain. And one may choose not to complain. I choose not to complain. Michael stared at the sincere little girl for a moment, and then said, No offense, but have you taken a look around here? These are pretty rough conditions for anyone. Never mind a girl your age. How can you not complain? Anne looked a bit confused, and then answered patiently, Our lives are shaped by choice, Michael. First we make choices, then our choices make us. She took a deep breath. Yes, an ungrateful person might see a place that is too small for 8 people, a diet that is limited, and portions that are too meager, and only 3 dresses for 2 girls to share. But gratefulness is also a choice. I see an annex that has 8 people while others are being herded away onto railroad cars. I see food that is generously provided by Meep, whose family uses their ration cards for us. I see an extra dress for my sister and me while we are surely those who have nothing. I choose to be grateful. I choose not to complain. Michael was amazed. He thought of his room full of stuff at home, his closet full of clothes, the car he had carelessly wrecked. He tucked one leg under the other, sitting cross-legged, and shook his head as if to clear the cobwebs. "Are you honestly telling me that you are always in a good mood?" Anne had folded her legs to mimic the way Michael was sitting, and she draped her dress over her knees. She laughed. "Of course not, silly, but if I ever find myself in a bad mood, I immediately make a choice to be happy. In fact, that is the first choice I make every day. I say out loud to my mirror, 'Today I will choose to be happy.' I smile into the mirror and laugh, even if I'm sad. I just say, 'Ha ha ha ha,' and soon I am happy, exactly as I have chosen to be." Michael was shaking his head in wonder. "You are a special girl, Anne." "Thank you," she said. "That is also a choice." Michael leaned forward. "Really?" he said with his eyebrows raised. "How is that?" "My life, my personality, my habits, even my speech, is a combination of the books I choose to read, the people I choose to listen to, and the thoughts I choose to tolerate in my mind. Before the war, when I was a little girl, my papa took me to the park to hear the orchestra play. At the end of the concert, from behind the musicians, 100 helium balloons of red and blue and yellow and green floated up into the sky. It was so exciting. I tugged on Papa's arm and asked, 'Papa, which color balloon will go the highest?' And he said to me, 'Anne, it's not the color of the balloon that's important. It's what's inside that makes all the difference.'" For a moment Anne was quiet. Then she looked Michael directly in the eye, lifted her chin, and said, "You know, I don't believe that being Jewish, or Aryan, or African has any bearing on what you can become. Greatness does not care if one is a boy or a girl. If it's what's inside that makes all the difference, then the difference is made when we choose what goes inside." Anne looked toward the clock again. Michael hadn't noticed the darkness that had filled the attic, but now he realized that only the glow of the light from the Westerkirk enabled him to see Anne's face. "I must get ready for dinner soon," she said. "Come with me to my room. I have something written for you." Michael followed Anne through the hatch in the attic, down the stairs, and back into the living room area. "Dinner is almost on the table, dear," her mother said as the two walked by. 5 minutes, no longer." "Yes, Mother," she answered, as she led Michael to a door to the right of the staircase. They walked into a room no larger than a closet. A small mattress lay on the floor, with 2 sacks of books beside the one pillow. "Margot and I share this room. It is very close, but we respect each other's privacy." Michael didn't see any room for privacy. Above the bed were pictures from magazines and newspapers that had been glued to the wall. "Are these yours?" Michael asked. "Yes," Anne smiled. "Beautiful, aren't they?" Michael looked more closely. They were pictures of old movie stars, and a picture of a statue by Michelangelo was positioned over a picture of a house in the country. To the left was a black and white photo of a rose that someone had colored pink. Spread all over the wall were pictures of cute, cuddly babies. "Yes, they are beautiful," Michael answered. "What are they for?" "My future," Anne whispered softly as she reached out to touch the picture of the rose. "These are the people I want to meet, the places I want to see, and the things I want in my life. Laughter and love, and a home with a husband, maybe Peter, and lots of babies." Suddenly tears came to her eyes. "Michael, if it were you here instead of me, would you be afraid?" Michael took a breath and answered, "Yes, I think I would be, Anne. Are you?" Anne pulled her hand down from the rose and clasped both hands in front of her. She cut her eyes toward Michael, and then looked back at the pictures. "Sometimes," she said, "but most often I choose not to be. Papa said, 'Fear is a poor chisel with which to carve out tomorrow.'" Turning, she continued, "I will have a tomorrow, Michael. Margot and Miss Petronella, they make fun of me.